Hi, so Outlaw Nottingham middle distance course preview. We're rapidly heading towards Outlaw, so I thought I would put together a little preview for you so that you can understand everything you need to know about racing Nottingham Outlaw. This is the May weekend, just so that you are clear on which one we're talking about. First things first, you need to register and rack up the day before. So you're racing middle distance on the Sunday, you need to be there to rack up, register on the Saturday. Registration closes at 5 p.m. and transition closes at 5:30 p.m. for your middle distance event. If you're racing sprint, check the athlete guide, because obviously sprint happens on Saturday, so you register, rack up and race all on Saturday. But if you're racing middle distance, register and rack up your bike on the Saturday to race on Sunday. You will not be able to register or rack up on the Sunday morning. At the expo, you will need photo ID or your BTF license, if you're a BTF member, to register for your spot. Make sure that you allow time, because they can get quite busy, so don't leave it to the last minute. Both registration and transition open at kind of 11 a.m. So give yourself plenty of time, and don't forget that there are races happening on the Saturday, sprints happening on the Saturday, so make sure that you allow plenty of time for parking and so on and so forth as well. Maybe don't pull up at 4:55. The other thing to note is that if you are relying on food at the expo as part of your race prep nutrition, in previous years the food options haven't been ideal race prep. So the nearest that one of my athletes got last year to a good race prep was a cheese and ham baguette. There was a lot of cake, a lot of sausage rolls, a lot of deep fried chips, a lot of high fat food, which obviously we want to kind of avoid the day before. So it's worth bearing that in mind. You may want to think about taking your own food options rather than relying on what's available at the expo, especially if you have a slightly more sensitive tummy. There is a race briefing available as part of the expo. They do various different times throughout the day, and that does allow for a Q&A. So if you have specific questions, feel free to go to that. But it is just a replay of the video that is available online. It's worth a watch because it changes every year. So the information you're going to get in this video, there's going to be more stuff, more up-to-date information and specifics that the race organisers can give you, especially about the bike run, which we'll come on to, the bike leg, which we'll come on to. But unless you've got questions, watching that video online is probably your easiest option. The race briefing is basically just a replay of that video and then the chance to ask questions. For both days, Saturday and Sunday, you need to pay to park. There is a link on their website to pre-book your parking. I think it's about £15 a day, and you do need to pay for it, otherwise you'll get a hefty fine. There's several car park options. Some of them are a 30-second walk from transition. Some of them are a longer walk, kind of, up to 15 minutes. Think kind of Eton Dorney territory. And you never know which car park you're going to get in. The earlier you arrive on race day, the more likely you are to get a car park that's close to transition. But we don't know which ones they're going to use first. So make sure that you allow plenty of time. Don't cut it too fine. Give yourself time for that walk if you need to. When it comes to racking up on the Saturday, do not leave any food or gels on your bike. There are crows, and apparently they will find that food. Also, don't rack up your helmet or any of your other kit. Just leave the bike. You're only leaving the bike and anything attached to it. So saddlebags, top bar bags, any of that kind of stuff. If you've got built-in water bottles, aerodynamic water bottles or cockpits or any of that kind of stuff, add them on morning of. Just leave your bike. You will need your helmet and your race wristband that you'll get given at registration to get in on the Sunday morning, to get into transition. So definitely don't rack up your helmet, otherwise you won't get into transition the next day. That does mean that you need to make sure you've got time on the Sunday morning to rack up the rest of your kit, put your nutrition on your bike and so on, before your race start, so factor that into your travel times along with potential walks from car parks. So when it comes to race day itself, your swim. All outlaw events are wetsuit compulsory, so you will need to wear a wetsuit. It's a 1.9 kilometre swim. You are swimming out a long way. So that first out is over a kilometre. It will feel like a long time before you get to that first turning buoy, but stick with it. Last year, water temperatures, and usually historically water temperatures have been around 16, 17 degrees, but obviously it depends on the weather in the run up to the event. They will not tell you what the swim temperature is. The only way to really find out is to check with someone who's done the sprint the day before and has some Garmin data. So if you know someone who's racing on the Saturday, that's a great way to find out what the water temperature is before you commit to which wetsuit you're going to put on, or whether you need extra layers for the bike, etc. It's a time trial start, so you have no acclimatization time. There's no opportunity to get into the water before you start, and you will be allocated swim waves based on the time that you submitted when you entered the event. It can be quite a fast swim, but it can also be quite congested through this first section here and up to that first turnaround point. So if you're a faster swimmer, it is a good idea to get towards the front of your swim wave to make sure that you don't get stuck behind slower swimmers, or perhaps people who've been a little optimistic about their swim time. Once you get around the turnaround point, it tends to thin out a little bit, and so often that is easier and a little less congested, a little wider along here. There are 2 pontoons to start. The nearest pontoon can be a little more of a scrum because it gets filtered over in this direction. So you kind of get squeezed by the ropes and by the kayakers. So if you have a choice, definitely aim for the furthest pontoon as you're starting, because then you just have to swim in a straight line. It can make it less of a scrum, make it less chaotic. The other thing to bear in mind is that as you're swimming along here, the sun is going to be coming up in this direction. You're swimming towards the sun, basically. So it can be very difficult to see the buoys along here if it's a sunny day, and it's definitely worth thinking about the kind of goggles you wear in that situation. Making sure that you've got tinted or polarised available to you. Alternatively, find someone that you trust and get on their feet. But what that can mean is that if people can't see where they're going, people might zigzag more, which is one of the reasons why this can be quite congested, but it also means that you need to be sighting for yourself rather than just relying on some random stranger in front of you. The first start for the swim goes off at 6 a.m. The last swim start should be at 7:20 a.m. And the cut-off is at 8:40 a.m. So you should get an hour and 20 minutes from the point that your swim starts to complete, with the final swimmer out of the water by 8:40. If the final swim wave goes in late, then they extend slightly, usually. You will exit the swim and you'll head into transition. It is a long transition. It's a very long, thin transition. So you will have to run quite a long way, potentially in your wetsuit and or with your bike, depending on where in transition you are. It's going to feel like quite a long run, especially because it's on grass. There are toilets in transition, but especially pre-race there can be queues. If you're female, there are female-specific toilets. It's worth hunting them out because there will be shorter queues at those. So again, if you're going to need the loo beforehand, make sure that you allow plenty of time for that, because there can be queues. You will head out of transition onto your bike course. Get on map. As you can see, you've come out of the swim somewhere down here. Transition is long, and you're going to exit. The bike exit is at the opposite end of swim in, so you're going to have quite a long run to do. You're going to start with a lap around the lake first, and then you're going to head out onto the bike course with a lap all the way around. You're essentially doing a lollipop route, so you will go out along this route and you will later come back down this route. You can see there is a bit of a hill here. The maximum elevation along there is about 3.3, so you're going to feel it a little bit, but it's not awful. It's not as sharp and pointy as it necessarily looks on here. The course is generally described as being rolling or undulating rather than specifically hilly, but just make sure that you keep a little bit in the legs for that final little push up, because when you come back there is a little tiny section of 6.1, so just make sure that you're fueled well for this section on the way back. You will descend down that on the way out, so as you head out onto the bike course you'll get to go down that hill, so you will have a good sense of what it's like and you'll know what you need to do to be ready for it on the way back. There is a roundabout here on the way out. You don't need to worry too much about it. As you head out onto the course, it continues to be undulating. There are some right-hand turns, but you know, just keep following the signage, pay attention. There should be marshals, but just keep following the bike course. One thing to look out for in the race briefing from Outlaw is potholes. In previous years there's been 2 or 3 long sections of potholes, kind of 100 metres long. They have said this year that they've been working with the local councils to repair some of that, so it's worth checking their race briefing to see where those pothole sections are, but they will be marked with potentially cones. You will need to stay on the right hand side of those cones, and with orange spray paint. Don't ride through the orange, that means you're about to crash into a pothole. So make sure that you're aware if you see any orange paint or any signs saying caution road surface, because they do signpost it really clearly, just be aware that you're coming towards a section that could be quite potholy. That might not be the time to take on fuel. That might not be the time to take on your nutrition. The aid station is just over halfway on the course. It's also worth adding there is a really lovely flat section here that runs from about 42 through to about 50 kilometres, so kind of your halfway point, and then a small kicker and then some continuing flat. If you've been struggling to get your fueling in or your hydration in, this is a great opportunity to do it, because there are some undulations, but you're going to really be able to kind of sit up and get some fuel in if you need to. If not, if you've been fueling well, that's a nice little time trial section. After that flatter section, there is a little kind of hill, and the aid station is on a flat point about halfway up that hill. The aid station, if you need the toilets, you will need to pull off at the start of the aid station, so keep your eyes peeled for that. After that, it is arranged as high five bottles, water, bananas, high five gels. Slow down, shout out what you need, and they will pass it to you. You can go super slow through that section. Finally, on the bike route, there is a roundabout at about 52 miles into your event, in the Radcliffe roundabout. There is also a roundabout in Radcliffe, which I believe is this one, and on the way back, so it's around 84 kilometres, 84.6 kilometres, it has a mandatory 20 miles per hour max. This will be marked, so you will be able to see it, but that's 32 kilometres per hour. So you will have to pay attention to where those speed restrictions start and finish, and it's because you're coming in and you're turning right to go back towards transition. And so because you're turning right, there will be speed restrictions for both you and cars in that area. 32 kilometres per hour for some athletes is not that fast, so just be aware of your speed through here, especially because it's a bit of a downhill. So you've got a nice, and it's not a steep downhill, it's like 1-2%. So you could really be putting the hammer down, and that's why they've got a speed restriction here. So just be aware of that on your way back in. Once you get to kind of 83 kilometres, you need to start being aware of it. You will get a pre-warning because you will have gone through a mini roundabout, and then you'll have basically come from in the countryside over one mini roundabout and through kind of a housing type area. Once you go over the railway bridge, you know that you are not far from that roundabout, so do keep your awareness at that point. The final section of the course, the last kind of kilometre, is a slightly different route back in. So on your way out, you've gone this way. On the way back in, you take a slightly more direct route, which is great because you know that you're nearly there. But this last kilometre, you go past some nice, very pretty houses and so on. It's a little twisty in places. There are speed bumps, there's gravel, there's debris from the trees on the roads, there's cattle grids, there's all manner of obstacles. So keep your awareness, keep yourself switched on. Once you take that turn and you start getting into this area, you know you're in that final stretch, and that's great. But just keep your full awareness while you go through there. And if you plan to do any last fueling before you get off the bike and head out onto the run, try and do that as you're coming through Radcliffe rather than once you get onto this section, because you're probably going to want two hands on your handlebars. And depending on how confident you are, if you're on a TT, there's some corners here that you may want to be sitting up for, especially because of the road surfaces. So just be aware, you know, it's quite narrow. You're not going to have a lot of swinging room on your bike. There's some gravel. It's, you know, it's a pretty rough road surface. So don't let that take you by surprise. Your cut-off time for the bike is 5 hours 20 minutes after you start. So from your swim start time, so you need to factor in your swim time, your T1, make sure that you're off the bike within 5 hours 20 minutes. Once you head out on the run, you will start from transition, and you are going to head basically a section round the water ski, around the Whitewater complex before you do a full lap of the lake, and then each time you'll go around the Whitewater Centre. You will complete 3 laps before you hit the finish. So you will actually run past transition 4 times. So you will start here, you will do this section 4 times, but 3 laps. There are a couple of grassy hills per lap. You can see from this, there's some sections that are kind of gravelly. There are some sections that are just little grassy. So this is a little off-road. You can see that it's a little twisty and turny around here, but that's going to give you a good mental break. It'll give you something different to look at. But there are a couple of little grassy hills that are short but steep. So they may be more walkable than runnable, especially on lap 1 where your calves may have some stress from the bike. So be prepared for the fact that you may have just a couple of little bursts of walking just to get up some of the steep little hills. There's 2 of them per lap, so just be mentally prepared for that. If you don't know about them, they can be quite an unwelcome surprise. You are doing 3 laps, and there are 3 aid stations per lap. You've got feed station 1, feed station 2 is in the Whitewater Centre, and then feed station 3 is the other side of the lake. Each feed station will have water, Coke, high 5 energy cups, electrolyte cups, gels, and then food. We don't yet know what the food will be. At most, you've got 2.4 kilometres between an aid station. So the longest run between an aid station is 2.4k. That's quite a decent chunk of time, especially if the weather is warm. So factor that into what you're going to carry with you for your own fueling needs. Once you've done your 3 laps, once you get back to your start point, you will then run back along here for a 4th time, filter out to the finish line, and you are done. It is worth noting that the photographers on the finish line take the photos about 2 or 3 metres after the finish line. So don't cross the finish line, look down, stop your watch, because that will be your race photo. So keep the arms up in the air, keep looking happy, and give yourself a good 5 metres before you stop the watch. Final finisher cut-off is at 4:20 p.m. or 9 hours after your start time. So there are cut-offs on the run leg, but you have basically 3 hours 40 minutes in which to complete your run. If you think you're going to be close and up against that, then have a look at the athlete guide to check the cut-off times on the run course, just to make sure that you're going to fall within your 9 hours. There's a cut-off time on each lap. But the key thing is, remember to keep looking up as you cross that finish line so you get an awesome race photo. Any questions? Drop me a WhatsApp.